And then he says, although the idea of playing across new environments helps to shake things up aesthetically, Pandora is too limiting a planet to support a third game in the series by itself. That's very dumb, buddy. How do you quantify the scope and breadth of a fictitious planet?
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Gaming Under the Influence. My name's Alex, this is Mike. Today we'll be discussing the Borderlands 3 trailer and what we think makes a good sequel, but
why we think the trailer's not a disappointment too, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I don't think it is a disappointment at all.
Yeah.
According to Polygon it is, but we'll get into that. Before we do that, Mike, what's this dark, delicious beverage I'm consuming at the moment?
This is called Sweet Spot Stout from Left Field Brewery in Toronto, Ontario. It's brewed with coffee beans, vanilla, and marshmallow, so all that accentuates the roasted malt and the bitterness of the coffee. It's a delicious stout, like most of the stuff brewed by Left Field, but particularly, I've expressed before, I love their sours and also their stouts. Those are my two favorite kinds of beers anyways, but from Left Field, they're excellent, so
it's
check out
good.
Left Field Brewery and especially their stouts. They got a line of dessert ones, like a Tartufo one in addition to this. All worth a try.
I think I like this better than Guinness, man. It's fantastic.
I think so too, man.
All right, dude. Borderlands 3. We saw the new trailer. We also saw an article on Polygon where the author was disappointed with what he saw in a 3-minute trailer.
Yeah.
It's like, is that not like reading like the first chapter of a book and saying it's complete shit?
It might be maybe even worse than just looking at the cover.
Yeah, because it's not even like the first 10 minutes of a game or something like that.
Yeah.
It's literally a trailer. It's meant to just
I don't think
be like an introduction, right?
To summarize what we're going to say later, I definitely don't think he's justified in saying that it's a disappointing trailer, but at the same time, his article raises important questions about what makes a good sequel and how it differentiates itself from the game that came before it and also from remakes, remasters, and ports. We wanted to make a video for you guys today categorizing what we think the difference is between these kinds of things and what good they can be for the game industry and for the medium that we all love. And
absolutely.
Hope you guys enjoy it. And this is GUI on what makes a good sequel, and also why the trailer for Borderlands 3 was not a disappointment in response to Polygon. And the argument that Polygon presented was that Borderlands 3, the trailer for it rather, is disappointing for failing to showcase any apparent visual, mechanical, or artistic novelty. It's got us thinking, Alex, about what makes a sequel and how it's different than a remake or a remaster, how it's supposed to be different than the game that came before it. Or even, in the case of movies and books, what generally makes a good sequel. And we think that a sequel cannot consist merely in imitation of what came before it. There is some truth to this Polygon article. You can't just replicate the previous game and call it a sequel. The results would probably be lacking and the product would fail to qualify as art.
Yeah, I feel like there wouldn't be enough new content to appease players who played the original. Wouldn't feel as fresh, right? Whereas it would feel stale and they would get bored, I would think, anyway, right? I mean, there are enough people who play remasters to say otherwise, but I think it's a sequel's looking for like a broader audience, right? They want everybody and more people who played the first, right?
Hopefully, in terms of audience reception, I believe, for sure. But I think from an artistic perspective, the thing made, a mere imitation of what came before would not be a creation. It wouldn't be a work of fine art,
just like a rehash, right?
Yeah, it would be more like, instead of an artistic interpretation of somebody, it would be a strict portrait of them, perhaps. It would not express a form, quote, engendered in the spirit of the artist and truly born in that spirit, nor would it be a work undertaken to make something beautiful, but rather an ideal reconstruction of a pre-existing individual. Which is, not necessarily a bad thing, right?
No, of course not. There's a ton of remasters out in the market now that have been exist for various reasons.
Yeah. We definitely believe there's room for something like this in the industry that is for imitation of an old product. Just because it's not necessarily fine art, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing or that it's evil per se. We believe this would appropriately be called a remaster or even a port, actually. The goal in this case is to present the best version of an existing creation and not to create something new, and either from scratch or with existing properties as the subject matter, like in a sequel.
Yeah. Yeah, in the console space, I guess the things that can be improved would be, like higher quality textures, higher frame rate.
Yeah. When it comes to what kind of things people would make better in what we're calling here a remaster or a port, you imagine there could be enhancements to background software, just keep the game.
Stuff like this gets lost on the PC, but the console space is so popular nowadays that
It doesn't seem to make as much sense in the PC market where a game is mostly live on a,
Yeah, I mean, you can push it as far as your hardware can go, however much you've spent on your PC, right? So
yeah, certainly,
definitely in the console realm, it's
even in the sense that it doesn't
more
make
beneficial.
It's not as necessary to sell somebody a new version of the game when you could just update the one that already exists, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you
That's true
charge
as
them
well.
for that update's another story, but I guess between two different console generations, it's
Yeah,
not
the
possible to
iterations
play the old
between
games,
generations, right? You get one powerful console, you can push the game to 60 FPS, like The Last of Us.
Yeah,
Remastered was good for that.
for sure. It's definitely nice to have backwards compatibility, and I know the backwards compatibility on Xbox One X is cool for, kind of turning the reason I bought one actually was because I heard you could play Final Fantasy 13 in 4K, and
That's
it looks
awesome.
like a pretty good, remaster.
Red Dead 1,
like
they
port.
updated.
Yeah.
There's a ton they've updated.
Yeah.
They've been doing well in that.
Yeah. So those games are essentially what we would consider remastered anyways, at least in line with our definition here. There would be enhancements made to background software, superficial features. There'd be all kinds of technological enhancements, increased frame rate or resolution, just to enable the game to run on new hardware sometimes, and often unused assets or some new content can be added, like with the Dragon Quest XI edition coming to Switch in the near future.
Yeah, I was thinking Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
Yeah,
they
Mario
added
Kart 8 Deluxe, new
all
Super
the
Mario
DLC,
Bros.
all
Deluxe,
the characters.
yeah.
New Super
Kind of
Mario's.
thing. The Bayonetta 2 remaster on Switch was a good example.
That was good too.
Yeah, there's a steady stream of remasters coming out, especially for the Switch, but also for all 8th gen consoles. Remasters of Borderlands included. We also recall Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. You mentioned these to me the other day when they released on the Wii U. Those were pretty quality remasters.
Halo Master Chief Collection was a good one.
Yeah, the best way to play the game. There's this pretty cool poet called Ezra Pound. He was alive in the 20th century, and I think a remaster is kind of analogous to what he described as a strict translation of something from one language to another. The goal is not to add anything or to substitute or rearrange parts, but rather to convey the sense and the totality of the original by the most efficient means possible. Not to get in the way of something or to reinterpret it, but rather just to present it as it is, in the best way possible. The curious thing about this article, the Polygon article we're discussing, that is that many of the apparently lacking features this guy identifies, he says this is not new and this is not new. Many of the things that disappointed the gentleman could also characterize a remaster, maybe even better than they could a sequel. And he even asks for what I would consider some full-on defects to be included in the game. Like, guy,
Royale.
who are you writing for that they want to hear you ask for a Battle Royale mode in their Borderlands game?
The Battle
Seriously,
Royale fans.
Who's your audience? I really want to know. That's out there. Probably a bigger audience than mine, but nonetheless, it must be... Buddy.
Tired at this point. I'm not against it, but there's no reason to add Battle Royale to every single first-person shooter game that exists now,
I'm
right?
fucking against it, I gotta say.
That's fine.
What
fair,
the hell?
Fair
Borderlands, blah.
I mean, no, I'm not against the Battle Royale genre in general. I am definitely against them adding in Borderlands because I'd rather they stick with, I feel like if they went the EA route and added it, how they added it into Battlefield, I think that heavily impacted that game. Whereas if they didn't add any Battle Royale, they could have focused on making the multiplayer better in other sense.
I see.
But anyway, that's a whole total derail. But in essence, what I'm saying is I want them to focus on Borderlands 2 and not adding a freaking Battle Royale. You know what I mean? Focus on what that game's strengths are and what makes that game fun and good.
Yeah,
I'm excited for Claptrap because I love Claptrap. Claptrap's the best.
So we were just talking about remasters, but there's also such a thing as a remake. There was recently the Resident Evil 2 remake, and, it's important to consider what makes those two things different as well, because I don't think a remake is quite the same as a sequel either, and I think that a remaster, while we said above it, exists to imitate. A remake or a reboot maybe is closer to what we'll soon define as a sequel, right?
Yeah.
It takes a pre-existing property as its subject matter, as a sculptor would work upon clay or a painter use paint, like the pre-existing thing, the property is the matter the guy's going to work upon to make what he's going to make. It's more like an interpretive translation, according to that guy, Ezra Pound. It subsumes the contents of a previous work as parts to a new whole into some new creative idea. Remakes and remasters may be difficult to distinguish superficially, from the outside.
Sometimes.
Yeah, at a first glance. But we believe it is a question of artistic intention, I guess, at the end of the day. Even if we, from our perspective, can't always tell, by making a list and qualifying the accidental features, what makes this game or that game. Did the creator set out to imitate or to create? That's what will differentiate a remake or a remaster, I believe. To instrumentally showcase something new, rather to instrumentally showcase something old or to paint a new picture with it. I guess by way of
we
examples,
sort
we
of-
would
yeah.
provide, the recent Resident Evil 2 remake. It was inspired by the original and retained many of the same aesthetic and very general gameplay conventions, but it did, however, receive a complete overhaul at the, moment-to-moment mechanical level, to the point of almost being an entirely different game, to my
Yeah,
estimation.
I guess we could add in the soon or far future Final Fantasy VII, if that's
Yeah.
still scheduled.
I guess we'll see how that comes.
We
but
haven't heard anything about that, but
I imagine
that
it'll
would
kind of be
considered-
like what we're describing right now, right? We can almost say it's based on the original rather than a strict recreation of it, right?
Yeah.
While we're not particularly familiar with the
'Cause it
original
won't be the
Resident
same
Evil
at
2,
all.
yeah,
It's
it won't be the same.
20-something-year-old game. When
No.
did it come out? 1990.
20 years
Jeez,
ago, at
man.
least.
Yeah. Right.
While we're not particularly familiar with the original, the original Final Fantasy VII or the original Resident Evil 2,
Yeah.
at least me, we know that everything else aside, alterations to the character controls and perspective to bring the remake closer to modern third-person shooters almost make it, as we say, an interpretive translation of the original game. The idea or form for the remake in the mind of its creators of the game, and not the story or art, which again are kind of like the paint in the painting, is a new creation. That's why it's different than a remaster or a port. And this brings to mind Resident Evil 7, doesn't it? Because it kind of sounds like what we're describing is Resident Evil 7, but that's a sequel. So
Yeah, although they do call it a sequel, but I mean, it did enough to stand out like on its own, right? As potentially either a new game, like you're saying, or a reboot if it
Yeah.
were categorized as one. It
yeah,
was
it could have been a strict reboot for sure.
it was an interesting sequel to say the least.
I think so. And,
I think there was both sides there saying that it shouldn't be first person, it should be third, but it was a good game in general. So
Yeah.
I think it was a successful sequel.
I definitely agree
And
it was a good game.
seemingly reboot-ish type game.
But I think it makes a good example towards our point, and the reason we mention above that remakes resemble sequels is because a sequel seems to have the same object as a remake, the creation of something new with something old acting as the matter or the paint in a new painting, right?
Right.
With Demon Souls, From Software set out to make an old-style game, but with elements made possible by new technologies. In short, to make something new out of something old. Quote, this is from that book there containing all those Miyazaki interviews. They suborn the spirit of their classic work, like King's Field or Armored Core, and their influences like Zelda
Yeah,
and Berserk, the anime Berserk there, to a new creative form, taking tropes and conventions of the past as pigment for their new title. And this process should characterize the productions of remakes and sequels alike, wouldn't you say? I think Resident Evil 7 is a great example of this because it diverges both artistically and mechanically from all the previous entries. Like the characters and like the theme is more like Texas Chainsaw Massacre than
Yeah, right.
Raccoon City, right? And mechanically, of course, first-person perspective and just the kind of things that you feel when you're playing the game. It's very different from previous entries, almost to be unrecognizable. Like they could have called it something else and nobody would have asked twice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's no need for us to elaborate on how at this point. Everybody's played the games 2 years later, yet the broader universe and the themes, the gameplay loop, and the particular brand of horror are unmistakably Resident Evil still,
Of course.
in spite of the fact that gameplay, again, could characterize something totally different. The spirit of the work has come to inform fresh and individual, like new matter. We believe that the defining characteristics of a sequel, which sets it apart from a remake despite these similarities, is the obvious factor that it sets out to extend or reinterpret the fictional universe of the original. I think that's really what makes a sequel different than, a total remake or a what's the word we used before?
Reboot?
A reimagining of the game.
Yeah, like a
entirely.
reboot, right?
Yeah. I think that's what makes a sequel different. Is of course
Yeah.
they want to have some continuity with the original fictional universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas a reboot would be like mostly set sort of in like an alternate universe or a new version of the.
But then again, for this reason, we can say the line between sequels and remakes can blur, not only apparently, as is the case with remakes and remasters, where sometimes it can be hard to tell them apart, but, due to the intention of the creator, they're actually different. Like in this case, I think factually, when a remake broaches original fictional territory in the same universe, it's not really other than in name, different than a sequel. Yeah. So they're kind of the same thing, I guess, in their essence, their definition.
So can we finally touch on Borderlands 3 and
Yeah.
the
Maybe it's time to
article?
finally talk about Borderlands 3, buddy. Yeah, for sure. And
Right on.
I think what all this means for the Polygon article is that the article seems to accidentally make a little bit of sense, wouldn't you say? While we agree
Yeah.
that sequels definitely need to be better, as the guy says.
Of course.
What does that mean here? He wants them to contain visual improvements, but remasters can do that. Or the evolution of mechanics. This can be good or bad. It's not necessarily a positive.
Right.
It is true that a sequel cannot merely be a rehash of what we have already seen and played, quote. No, that's definitely true. This would probably make it a remaster, in spirit at least, right? Yeah. But when it comes to the trailer, we think the author's conclusions are ridiculous, don't we, Alex?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we can argue against all of his points in that article.
As we said, it makes some sense to ask for a sequel to be some of the things that he's asking for, but
yeah, of course,
some claims he makes here are that there might be new characters exhibited in the trailer, but we're given very little reason to care about them. But I didn't know that that's what trailers were meant to accomplish anyways.
It's merely just an introduction of these characters. This is their name, this is who they are, these are the bad guys, these are the 4 new Vault Hunters. It's just it's like premiering them to you. These are the guys, right? There's no reason to
he wants
fall
a lesson
in
on
love with a
fatherhood
character
from the relationship between the characters.
Right?
And
I was wondering when you'd insert
masculinity.
God of War into this one.
7 for 7, buddy. And he says the quality of the visuals doesn't seem to have improved, but I don't think he's played the original titles if that's what he thinks, because they definitely didn't look like that. Yeah.
It'd be almost insane to say that a brand new game being developed for PC, PS4, and Xbox One wouldn't look better than last gen.
I mean, and it does.
Like
the
of
evidence
course it
before
does.
your
Yeah,
eyes. It's just sensationalist, probably some clickbaity.
I mean,
trying to enrage the community.
if anything, cell shading maybe a little bit slightly more difficult to discern like graphic evolution over time, because when you're going for lifelike, like realistic graphics, it's easier to see the improvements. Sure. But you can still see them nonetheless. It looks like a much better.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know exactly what the guy means to be saying, but the quality of the visuals, as a broad category, certainly improved,
absolutely,
for all of the reasons you just described.
Yeah.
And then he says, although the idea of playing across new environments helps to shake things up aesthetically, Pandora is too limiting a planet to support a third game in the series by itself. That's very dumb, buddy. How do you quantify the scope and breadth of a fictitious planet? What stops them from adding onto infinity? You know,
it's a planet.
We haven't managed to quantify all of the spaces on the planet Earth, and you're telling me this fictitious planet is not big enough to support a new sequel? That's dumb. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Anyways, that's very silly.
That's dumb. Yeah. Then he says it needs at least 1 or 2 new ideas, and this is totally a vacuous thing to say.
You just need a new idea, bro. Baseless criticism.
I don't know what the hell that means. Great. Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Thanks for coming out and contributing.
Thanks for coming out. Yeah. The desire for something new, B, is not the same as the desire for a new creation or a new work of art, a sequel, especially if new really means the inclusion of obtrusive and undesirable modern gameplay modes and conventions. Is he seriously requesting the insertion of a battle royale mode for sheer novelty? Like, literally just for something new? He literally says, but after this lackluster trailer, I'd welcome news about a battle royale mode, because what else is there? What do you mean?
Have you ever played Borderlands? It's
mind-boggling. Who are you writing this article for, bro? My God.
Borderlands is great, man.
Yeah.
You should try it one time. Maybe you'll see what's so good about it.
So. Antiquarianism, like making something old just for the sake of being old, is just as bad as making something new for the sake of making it new. It's not intrinsically good to be like new or like old. Yeah. It's possible for both older and newer aesthetics and mechanics to be used well in producing a game in line with an original creative idea. Standout examples on both sides include Octopath Traveler, Dead Cells, Celeste, or Dragon Quest XI on the one hand, the throwback hand, using something old to make something new.
Turn-based.
And then on the other hand, we have Resident Evil 7, Final Fantasy 15, the recent Tomb Raider entries, which go in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And those are both, like, to my mind, I love all those games.
Those are all good games you mentioned. I mean,
just to say something old is not necessarily good and new is not necessarily good. It matters what you're trying to make and do with it. Intent is the most important thing here. You know?
Exactly.
This is all ridiculous. He wants new. Give me battle
new
royale
ideas.
Or nothing.
Where are the new ideas, Gearbox? Yeah. Feed them to us.
When it comes to the trailer, I guess, did you like the trailer, Alex?
I did like the trailer. I thought, it showed a little bit of gameplay. It showed the 4 new Vault Hunters, which at the time they didn't. It didn't really say much about them, but I read a little bit about them. They sound interesting and cool. Yeah. So I don't know what to say about the antagonists yet, but they look okay. So we'll see if they can hold up to that standard that Handsome Jack set.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah,
he was a fantastic character. One of my favorite antagonists in a video game. He's hilarious.
Yeah, he'd really. Yeah, I think we can say the trailer appealed to us, and that there were definitely a variety of original environments and locales. The author of this article would have recognized as such if he played the originals, at least 1 and 2, because I know neither of us played the pre-sequel by 2K Australia, not Gearbox. Yeah. And that there's an obvious variety of new characters, the specializations and skills of which we can't wait to explore, because I know we both love the skill trees and the previous characters and games in greater detail. I can't wait to explore those. There was wonderful world building and characterization, and a great vibe, we believe, shows through in both the previous games and in the trailer, in the jungle, cityscapes, characters designs on show here. I don't think there's grounds for disappointment at the very least, especially not the grounds that this.
No,
this
I
guy
mean
describes.
there's obviously there's a possibility of Gearbox sort of fucking this one up.
Yeah, hey.
There's that, but that's always a possibility.
No, I'm not
matter
denying
what,
that. Just to
right?
say, like,
But
it's not in the
from what
trailer
we
that
saw,
they did.
it looks good, and we're definitely gonna give it a try, no matter what. We'll play it. So
Yeah, definitely, buddy.
I've
looking forward
been
to it.
itching for a little bit of Borderlands. It's
Yeah,
a fun
man.
game, and
Playing the Division has gotten me amped up for it a little
Oh,
bit.
yeah.
Same
Hell yeah.
species of game. And I know in terms of what we want for Borderlands, Borderlands 3, that is, we can in good conscience tell people what to make, like everybody else on the internet can dictate artistic intent. But I know if more of the same, quote unquote, in terms of mechanics, with slight quality of life improvements and a captivating world and gunplay, if that's all we get, that would satisfy us probably just fine, right?
I think so.
Yeah, we're hoping for an antagonist to compete with Handsome Jack. His
Right
charismatic
on.
presence kind of reinvigorated Borderlands 2 versus 1. I don't know if you
heard
remember, like, the
that. I
difference
didn't
in
play a
tone
lot of
between
1,
them.
but
Yeah, it was pretty extraordinary. I think mostly due to that character. And his presence reinvigorated Borderlands 2 with character and narrative momentum.
absolutely.
It is an almost entirely different game from B1 from a story perspective, probably because of him again. And from this perspective, it's a great example of the ways in which a sequel can stand apart from its predecessor while retaining mechanical and aesthetic elements intact.
Hell yeah.
So we hope for the same in Borderlands 3.
Damn right. I
Thank you
think
guys
it'll
for
be good.
listening tonight. We just want to say a few words to you about the cool things that we've accomplished in the games we're playing this week, and I think the only game I'm playing right now is Sekiro. I beat the Guardian Ape fight after trying for 3 days, probably over and over again, hundreds of times probably. I beat him first. I had to turn the Demon Bell charm off there. I beat him. I beat the first fight.
Pleb.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm a loser.
Greasy pleb.
And then I beat a bunch of bosses in between him, and then I beat him again in the first few
Nice.
tries on hard mode. So fuck that guy. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I finally beat first the guy on the horse, and then the blazing bull.
Blazing Bull.
Holy cow, man!
Yeah, he's a pain.
That guy was so
He's
fast.
tough. You fight him
He's-
again
he's
later
fa-
too, I hear.
Really?
Or a
man.
version of that same enemy.
He was fast, but finally got the shinobi execution on his ass.
Good times.
Felt good. It was
for you,
nice.
man.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
keep pushing through, man. It's a fucking
I'm
struggle.
gonna keep pushing too. We're
Yeah.
almost done, buddy. We're
You're almost done. I'm not.
We're almost done too. It's
But I'll
okay.
catch up, maybe.
Yeah.
What a great game, Sekiro.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So that's it for the week. I hope you guys enjoyed the video.
Thanks for stopping by.